The Indianapolis Colts season is almost finally over, and one of the next chapters will be free agency. Which players are set to hit the open market in March, and who's worth bringing back? We'll dive into all that today on Locked On Colts. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Jake Arthur, and he is Zach Hicks. You know the two of us from horseshoehuddle.com, of course. Today we're going to identify the Colts' most notable free agents and tell you which ones we would make sure that we re-sign, which ones we would let walk and test the open market, and which players we'd flat out cut, either to create cap space now, down the line, or just to free up that position for someone newer and younger to take over. So first, Zach, we'll go with the heavy-hitting topic, cuts. Some of these are kind of obvious. I mean, they're going to have to swallow some dead cap regardless. Some of these are pretty tough. Who knows? But let's go ahead and start out with probably the most obvious one. That's quarterback Matt Ryan. They may not have to cut him if he decides to retire. But basically, they're on the hook for $35 million if he's on the roster throughout next year. So it's only going to cost them $18 million to just flat out cut him. So
only going to cost them.
Yeah. Oof.
Yeah.
In relation to $35 million, though, that's like literally almost half.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely insane that though we're in this place now where the Indianapolis Colts under Chris Ballard almost every single year have been among the lowest in dead cap across the entire league. Like they've traditionally never had like any dead cap under Chris Ballard. And now we're looking at, these players we're going to look at, it probably makes sense to cut and they're all going to pretty much all of them are going to cause dead cap. They're going to create dead cap for the Colts. So yeah, Matt Ryan, that's a tough one, man. That's what, $17 or $18 million in dead cap for cutting a quarterback that you expected to be here. When they made that extension or that contract reworking, they expected Matt Ryan to be the starting quarterback going into next season, but it makes just so much more sense to cut him if he continues playing. I do think there's a realistic possibility that he retires after the season. He has taken a beating, and it's just not been the season that he expected. But these old quarterbacks, they like to keep going and going, and someone's going to still pay you to play next year. Why retire? So. Yeah, the Colts, if he ends up not retiring, even if he does retire, I do think there is going to be some dead cap with that. That's more of a Kyle Raposa type question right there. But if they cut him, I think before his roster bonus is due in February, I think they can save $17 million on that contract. So it's a tough one. It's a tough pill to swallow. You could get, kind of fancy with it and do a post-June 1st cut, which I think would split that into the next 2 years, which would make it, I think a dead cap of $9 million this year and $9 million next year, which that makes that a little bit more manageable. But either way, that's going to be a tough pill to swallow for a guy that you expected to be here for, the next year or two.
Yeah, that's one that, we kind of laughed at how much of an insane contract it was going to be for the Falcons to digest after they traded him away. But it's going to leave its impact on the Colts as well. Before we move on, I just want to mention I got these figures from Spotrac.com and verified them on Over the Cap as well. And yes, these are all going to create dead cap, but I kind of feel like this is a by any means necessary type of offseason where Jim Irsay is just like, yeah, we're going to have a lot of wasted money, but we just have to do what we have to do to move on to the next thing. So that's kind of why we have a list of names here. Next up, Nick Foles. It's going to cost him $1.5 million to just... so
terrible deal. I mean, look, I get it. It's a 2-year deal. You're expecting Frank Reich to be the head coach from last year and going into this next season as well. But, he was here to play for Frank Reich. So you gave him that 2-year extension thinking Frank Reich was going to be here for those 2 years. And I have no clue why they guaranteed any money after year one. That doesn't make any sense to me for an older quarterback that in a perfect world is never seeing the field. Why are you guaranteeing money after year one, because you never know where you could be, especially with a quarterback like Matt Ryan, where say Matt Ryan worked out. Matt Ryan was perfectly fine. Nick Foles never saw the field this year. We're going into year 2 of Matt Ryan on his last year of his deal. You'd probably still be looking to draft a young quarterback, and then you wouldn't really want Nick Foles in that scenario either. So you probably want to, release him anyway. So yeah, the fact that they're going to have to eat a $1.5 million dead cap on Nick Foles, that's just bad contract. Like, I mean, again, Chris Ballard did a great job throughout most of his tenure of not giving out bad contracts, but you're going to see with a couple of these, man, like bad contracts. And that's not even talking about the guys that we can't release or that have underperformed on contracts or something like that, or guys, like a Shaquille Leonard who is not playing right now on that giant contract. There's a lot of bad contracts or contracts that aren't looking so great right now. And yeah, the Nick Foles one's a minor one, but man, to eat a dead cap on a quarterback that in a perfect world was never going to play for you. Come on, come on, man.
Yeah, that's $20 million worth of dead cap in 2 quarterbacks that you're probably going to move on from. At the time I got it, I understood they didn't want to have to entrust Sam Ehlinger in case something happened to Matt Ryan. They probably legitimately thought they were a postseason contender, and in the event that something happened to Matt Ryan, they could just plug in another veteran that's played for Frank Reich before. But we've now seen, obviously, that was not going to work. Next up, now this one is a little more tricky because you and I talked right before this. Ryan Kelly has been a popular choice for this, but he's got dead cap over the next 2 years. That amounts to just under $7 million. Now he's a startable center. He's just not playing up to the standard he'd set previously in his career.
Yeah, I think he's getting paid like a top 6 or 7 center still. Like there have been a couple other guys who have moved ahead of him. So I don't think it's, the top overall center money that it was, but it's still a pretty healthy contract. I think it's like $9 or $10 million a year, or no, his was up to like 12, wasn't it? Wasn't it up to 12? I think you were on over the cap earlier.
I'd have to look at it again, but yeah, he was paid pretty handsomely for a center, for an interior lineman in general. He was up there.
Yeah, and yes, his play has dropped off, and yes, early in the season it was bad with Danny Pinter next to him, with the issues at left tackle as well. His play was just really, really porous, and again, we have no clue inside the locker room what the issues are with these blitz pickups or these blitz calls. Is it Ryan Kelly making these calls? Because if it's Ryan Kelly making these calls, if we ever find that out, then my opinion drops even lower. But as of right now, I mean, you're looking at a guy who's probably like the 15th to 20th best center in football. Maybe on good games or good days, he can get back into that fringe top 10 range, but we don't really see those good days as much anymore. So it's kind of tough. I don't think his cap hit is crazy high, but it's still an overpay. But to eat up 2 years of dead cap for a startable center, even if his play is not warranting what he's getting, that's a tough one. I could see either way with it. Maybe a trade, but how much could you really get for him right now? I don't know. That's a tough one. I'd have to leave it to you guys in the comment section. Would you eat, I think, $7 million of dead cap over the next 2 seasons to cut Ryan Kelly? Is it worth that? I don't know. I don't think you really save that. I mean, I think you save it's like 6 or 7 million this next year, and then around the same the year after that. So you do get a little bit of saving, but it's really not it's not like you're getting like a $20 million saving or anything like that.
Exactly. It doesn't. It's not like it clears up so much space that it's like a slam dunk. You definitely do it. That's a pretty manageable amount of cap. I got 2 more here. One more on offense. Mo Alley-Cox, only $2.4 million in dead cap. You're paying him to be just a total non-contributor. I'm guessing the hope was that he could fill some semblance of the Jack Doyle role, but that really hasn't been the case. You're far and away relying on a rookie in Jelani Woods and Kylan Granson, second-year guy, to catch passes at tight end. And if Drew Ogletree would have never got himself hurt this summer, who knows? Maybe he factors into that as well. So Mo Alley-Cox, decent player, but he's just been surpassed. There's no reason. And if it only costs you $2.4 million, kind of like with Ryan Kelly, it's almost a negligible amount, but you got to make room for these other guys to see some snaps.
Yeah, Mo Alley-Cox just doesn't factor into the near or present future for the Colts. So, yeah, I think that's an easy one. You definitely make that move. And again, you eat the dead cap, another bad contract that, we thought going into the season might have been okay, but just another contract that ended up being bad and that you probably have to eat some dead cap on.
Yeah, this last one may be a little more polarizing, but I was actually surprised to see that this guy represents no more dead cap, so you can get out of this contract without penalty. That's Kenny Moore, and I think this would be mutual. He had the contract dispute over the summer, still showed up and reported to camp and everything, and has been playing. He's hurt now, of course, but man, I mean, if there's disgruntled players this year in the locker room, it seems at least earlier in the season when he was talking a little more, he's probably among them. I don't know that either side would want this relationship to continue. I can't say that for sure, but I can definitely imagine they probably want to mutually part ways.
Yeah. I won't touch too much on this because we don't want to run this episode into 50 minutes like that for you guys. But I think it makes sense for a mutual departure here with these two sides. I mean, Kenny Moore, they can get out of it by just releasing him, or maybe they can get like a day 3 pick for him, because look, Kenny Moore's still a fine player. He didn't really fit this scheme. Maybe a new defensive coordinator comes in with a brand new ideas for Kenny Moore to unlock him again, and they can kind of repair that relationship. But they have an easy out in this contract. They have teams around the league that would probably love to have him. Hint, hint, Matt Eberflus with the Bears would probably love to have him over there. So it probably makes some sense to either release or trade him this offseason.
Yeah, and you've got guys like Julian Blackmon's playing well. You would still look through free agency or the draft to upgrade the position if you did move on from Kenny, but there's guys there on the roster that can contribute and you can kind of groom to take over there. We're going to get into the players that we'd lock up to new deals here in a moment, but first, this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. With Prize Picks, it's daily fantasy made fun and easy. Just pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their stat projections, then you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you can watch, including the NFL, NBA, and MLB, of course, but also stuff like esports, NASCAR, and cricket. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. Withdrawals are also safe and easy as well, and Prize Picks is currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. That means if you deposit $100, Prize Picks is going to give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Okay, Zach, so they got about 20 free agents, I think, was my last count, before they've made some modest roster moves. There's really only a handful that I would say you definitely bring back. First up, just looking at the offensive side of the ball, of course, Paris Campbell. He's revitalized his career this season, and I would have to think he would look even better with any semblance of steady offensive play from quarterback to offensive line, everything. We've seen he could be used in multiple ways. I say bring Paris Campbell back. Yeah,
I think as long as the money makes sense, because I'm very, very fascinated to see what his market's going to look like, because we're talking about he's been fairly productive in just an abysmal offense this year. I think he's isn't he like 400 or 500 yards receiving? He's been healthy all season for the first time. He's shown some big playability at times, and we saw on Sunday that big catch he had. And we've seen the wide receiver market in recent years just explode. I'm not saying Paris Campbell's a guy who's going to get $20 million a year, but Paris Campbell, a guy who just had his first healthy season in the NFL, is probably looking at $5, $6, maybe $7 million a year, just because that's the nature of wide receiver. Like, is that too much for you, Jake? Do you think that's too much that you would pay for him?
No, I would do it because he's not really a boom or bust type of player. I think he's reliable. He's the type of player you need in every offense, pretty much. He can, of course, do things after the catch. He can make the short plays. He can extend those, but he can also win deep. Obviously, again, you mentioned that catch on Sunday. Man, I'd bring him back for under 10 million for sure. Especially if it's in that 5-6 million range. Yeah,
I think if Frank Reich here, it's 100% he's coming back. But with the new coaching coming in, maybe a new GM, maybe there. I don't know. I think that's going to be a call where I think it could go either way. But the next guy you have on the list, I think, is almost 100% going to come back, and that's Ashton Dulin at wide receiver. I can't think of any reason whatsoever to let Ashton Dulin go. You're getting a top tier special teams player whenever he's out there. He's shown that he can play some receiver in a pinch and play well. Like, we're talking wide receiver 5 here, wide receiver 4 type guy. He has to be one of the better ones in the league. Not because he goes out there and puts up 200-yard games every time he gets a chance, but I mean, you're just getting a guy at the bottom of the roster that can do it all. He can return kicks, he can cover kicks, and he can play some slot. He can play outside. You can do those little reverse plays to him, and we've seen him have some success in the past. So, yeah, Ashton Dulin, that's a homegrown guy, a guy that you've developed in your system. He's gotten better and better every year. There's no reason to let Ashton Dulin go this offseason. I think that's the easy resign right there.
Yeah, that's my thing. Because I can't imagine the contract will be all that much either. So a guy that can contribute in that many different ways I think you got to do it. We're really getting into the murky water here on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
It's these linebackers, Bobby Okereke and EJ Speed. And before anyone says, well, duh, you bring them back, the issue is that Shaquille Leonard makes like $20 million a year. Bobby Okereke is going to get a big deal this year. He's going to have like 150 tackles. He can make plays in the passing game. He's a pretty good. He's really well-rounded everywhere. He's a great linebacker for the modern NFL and the style of play that offenses are using nowadays. The problem is just going to be if the Colts can afford to have 2 linebackers making a lot of money. I don't know what his deal, like 12 million maybe. I don't know.
12 to 15, I think.
He's going to make a lot.
Yeah, I think a lot depends on the status of Shaquille Leonard going forward. If the Colts have any chance of bringing him back, I really don't think he's coming back at all. It's just, again, so much money going to Shaquille Leonard right now. Then you have Zaire Franklin, who's having just a phenomenal season as a starter. You have that. It's just kind of like a logical move to have Zaire Franklin kind of replace Bobby Okereke if Shaquille Leonard is going to be on the field next year, because Shaquille Leonard's had major nerve surgery twice this season. And among a lot of other injuries too in his career. So who knows if Shaquille Leonard even plays next year or if he ever plays again. You know, that's not me trying to break any news here, but it's just like nerve surgery is massive. So, you know, if we see another surprise young retirement, like a Shaquille Leonard, that opens the door for Bobby Okereke. But outside of that, I think Chicago is where he's going to be. I think that's going to be one of the easier ones. I mean, Chicago's going to go into this offseason with like $130 million in cap space, and they just trade away their starting linebacker at the trade deadline this year. Like, we should already pencil in Bobby Okereke to Chicago with Matt Eberflus.
Yeah, that's another one that seems like a layup, almost as easy as the Al-Qadim Muhammad move.
Yeah, well, that one was more than a layup. That was like if you were allowed to take a free throw from the layup line. That was so obvious.
Shoot, what was I gonna say?
Our next guy is EJ Speed. If we're gonna jump into that, so
sorry. So I was gonna say the Shaquille Leonard thing bears monitoring because I guess he like removed the Colts from his social media. We don't know what's to come. Some guys do that like every offseason. But it's something worth looking into, I guess. So he's obviously outspoken on a lot of stuff. But so EJ Speed doesn't really factor into all that much because he's not going to make as much money and he doesn't play the same spots that Okereke and Leonard do. But he's kind of like an Ashton Dulin of the defense for me. Go ahead and bring him back. He's gotten so much better defensively this year. I would feel comfortable saying he's one of Bubba Ventrone's favorite special teams players. He's gotten really, really good there as well. That's an easy one for me.
Yeah, I think you just offer him the same contract that you gave Zaire Franklin last year and you call it a day. You know, the 3 years, 10 million, or 2 years, like 8 million, or 2 years, 7 million, whatever that comes out to there. I think that's a pretty fair offer for him to be the third linebacker next year. So as long as his relationship is fine in the locker room and he doesn't want to change the scenery, which, you know, a lot of players probably will, I think EJ Speed coming back for like a special teamer type contract. And then one more special teamer to mention here before we run out of time on this segment is you guys are going to get the rare opportunity to hear me praise a kicker.
Drum roll.
Look, here's the thing. I hate kickers because they're so bad at their job. They are just traditionally so terrible at their job. But when a kicker is playing well, I will give them praise. I always say Justin Tucker is a great kicker, and he's great for what he does. I'm not saying that the Colts kicker Chase McLaughlin is at that level, but Chase McLaughlin's come in and just been awesome this year, and it's kind of hurt the tank effect. The Colts could be picking number one if they stuck with Rodrigo Blankenship all season. But as Jake and I were saying before we started recording, we know how bad it is here in Indy when you are missing on kicker. When you have Adam Vinatieri last season, when you have Rodrigo Blankenship early this season, that's cost the team gains. Chase McLaughlin has come in. He's made, I think, 10 kicks over 50 yards this year, over 80% made on all of his kicks. I think he's made every extra point this year too. Like he's been a guy that that should be the number one guy that you're extending this offseason. I know it's a kicker and I hate kickers, but the only thing I hate more than the kicker position and kickers themselves is bad kickers. It's just bad kickers. Chase McLaughlin has not been a bad kicker this year, so I'm all for extending him and giving him, a nice little pay raise.
Yeah, this one's easy for me. We were just talking, just get this one done and out of the way. Because like you said, when you have bad kicking, it sucks. Like 2019, they got stuck in the Adam Vinatieri stuff. And then, Rodrigo Blankenship, not that he was always terrible, but like you never knew kick to kick what was going to happen. McLaughlin, every extra point. He's reliable from 50 yards. Yeah, he's going to have the occasional miss, but every kicker does. You just take care of that. He's been overall really reliable. Like you said, over 80%. I'll take those odds. Kicker's just not a position you want to worry about, and he allows you to just set it and forget it, kind of. So I'm down with that one for sure.
Guys, and before we move on to tell you guys who we let walk in the market this offseason, I want to tell you about our friends at Bet Online, which is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From pro football, college bowl season, to basketball and the World Cup. We've got it all here on betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Jake, so this first guy we're going to talk about here on our, the guy that we are letting walk, this offseason. The first guy we're going to talk about is probably a controversial one because the Colts made a trade for him this offseason, Yannick Ngakoue, pass rusher Yannick Ngakoue. And he came in, he delivered the sacks that he promised. 9.5 sacks, according to, I think most major outlets. Pro Football Focus has him at 12 sacks this season. And he kind of delivered on that promise that we expected. The Colts had a double-digit sacker, but it didn't feel like it, to be completely honest. I think Brandon Thorne over at Establish the Run does a great job of charting quality sacks and charting, sacks generating stuff like that. And I believe Yannick Ngakoue is at like 4 this year. Like a lot of his sacks and his sack production have been cleanup sacks, not very high quality sacks whatsoever. His pressure percentage is near the bottom of the league, especially if you look at Pro Football Focus for that. And on top of all that, he's like the worst run defending edge in football by far. Like, and that's been the case for like 4 years now. Like he's easily the worst run defending edge in the entire league. So for me, I wouldn't hate bringing him back because he does have some juice off the edge, but you'd have to play him like 30% of the snaps. Like he can only be a pass rusher, which I don't know if I think he's going to get starting opportunities other places. So why come back here to be a sub rusher on a potentially bad team? So I just think it makes sense for both sides to let him walk. Not a horrible player, good person, but just it's tough to have a player like that starting. A player who's so bad in the run game, and then he gets so worn down in the run game that he's not as effective as a pass rusher as what you'd like. I just don't think that signing worked out, or that trade worked out perfectly for the Colts, and it really wasn't exactly what they needed.
Yeah, you were right how it didn't feel like a 10-sack season, really. It felt like Eric Walden had like 11 sacks a handful of years ago, and it's like, where did all those come from? There were a lot of cleanup sacks and unblocked things like that. I again, like you, I kind of have that same stance. I wouldn't hate it because like he will give you some of those numbers, but there are several factors at play. I think those sack numbers are always going to get him a pretty healthy contract. He's going to take... Because he's not a good run defender, you're going to wind up playing him too much over guys like Dio Dangbo, Which, if you want to finally see this Kwity Dio Dengbo thing go forward, then you're not going to bring Ngakoue back. If Gus Bradley returns, then we obviously know he's going to play Yannick Ngakoue like as much as possible. It's pretty much Eberflus and Al-Qadim Muhammad. So.
Let me say real quick, Gus Bradley's not coming back. He's definitely
no, I'm sure he.
Yeah, he's absolutely gone. Yeah, 100% gone. Like absolutely gone. Like there's a better chance of Parks Frazier returning than Gus Bradley. like Gus Bradley's not coming back. But yeah, I get your point there, and that leads to our next guy. Our next guy. I know I'm jumping one on your list here, but Brandon Faison. We're absolutely not bringing Brandon Faison back. Right. Gus Bradley's the only guy who would bring him back. I actually think he got a little too hated on this year. Like he actually didn't put together that awful of a season. Early in the year when we were pissed about everything that was going on with this team, he was at the butt of so many bad plays. So it just seems so much worse. And then lumping in a couple other guys that we don't really need to talk about here because I think all of you guys listening completely agree. Matt Pryor, absolutely not. Do not bring him back. Dennis Kelly, not that he was terrible. It's just there's no point in bringing him back. And then punter Matt Hawk. If Rigoberto Sanchez is coming back, there's really no reason to bring back Matt Hawk. And Matt Hawk, man, I mean, so many shanked punts this year.
We've all been watching football for forever. I can't remember seeing a season where one guy shanked so many punts. Now,
and it didn't matter.
Now, granted, Colts fans are spoiled with punting too because they went from Hunter Smith to Pat McAfee, and that was awesome. To Rigoberto Sanchez,
right?
So they've had 20 years of awesome punting, but again, I've just never seen a guy like kick off the side of his foot. So like, I don't understand how that happens so much, and he is not a kickoff specialist either. So there's just no point.
Make Chase McLaughlin the punter as well. That's the key. We're going to pay him a lot anyway. Yep. Let's make him the punter as well. But the toughest decision to make, I think, in my opinion, and I think your opinion as well, Jake, is Rodney McLeod. Because Rodney McLeod, I put this on Twitter the other day, he has been phenomenal for the Colts this year. If you look at his numbers, he's setting career highs in total tackles, career highs in tackles for a loss, career highs in run stops and just overall stops. Career high in pass deflections, career high in lowest missed tackle percentage of his entire career this year, and playing more around the box than he ever has. And this is in his 11th season, age 32.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's been in the league for a decade, so those numbers mean something. He's been around for a while.
Yeah. Right. He didn't even start week 1. He kind of came in a little bit week 2, and then week 3 is when he really became a starter. And he's setting all these career best numbers for himself. He's a guy where if this team were competitive, if this team were a good team and a team that, we had high expectations for next year, I think it's an easy resign because you would talk about him as being a glue guy, a locker room guy who also performs on the field. That's who you want back. But maybe I'm just like thinking for his best interest here, like go somewhere good, go play for a good team next year. Go win a ring. Go play for Buffalo. Buffalo needs a third safety so bad with those top 2 guys getting hurt so much. Go Buffalo and just rock out for them if someone goes down. Like Rodney McLeod, man, I cannot say enough good things about him. Just outstanding season, career year, and he was everything the Colts needed on defense. It's just the Colts let him down. He was great this year, though. I love Rodney McLeod. I wish he could come back, but I would let him walk purely for the sake of letting him go. Like, get out of here, buddy. You go.
Yeah, no, I would have zero issue with him returning. I think he was a great find for them. It kind of reminiscent of when the Colts brought Mike Adams in at safety, a 10, 12-year guy who everyone assumed probably didn't have a whole lot left. McLeod's been great. My thing is the Colts have just several young players at the position. I want to see him play. I want to see Nick Cross. Rodney Thomas has got to get out there. Julian Blackman. I just want to see these young guys. That's my main thing. And if the Colts were in a position to win right now, I would say let the young guys sit and let McLeod take over because there's a reason he's out there. It's not just that he's playing really well. It's that the secondary is better with him being in it because of communication. Like him and Stephon Gilmore have got everything on lock, and it's a big reason is because how they can communicate to the young guys as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just really want to see the youth moving forward is all.
Yeah, one quick thing I'll say about Ronnie McLeod before we close out. I think he is Pro Football Focus's, I want to say, 5th highest graded safety in coverage this season. Among all starting safeties in the NFL this year, I think he's their 5th high graded. I think he's an 80.4 grade, which is like a very good grade in coverage this season. That's with only having, I think, 1 interception. So it's not like he's getting those boosts from jumping routes and getting picks. That's purely from his pass breakups, from his hits coming downhill. Yeah, he's just a great player. Like I wish him nothing but the best.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, the Colts have other free agents coming up, but just they were either not worth discussing because it's an easy decision, or they're just kind of bottom of the roster players. But
Right.
I think that is it for us today. We'll be back with you guys tomorrow to keep looking into the offseason because we're all ready for it. Absolutely. Maybe we'll begin to get you guys a little ready for this final game on Sunday against the Texans.
Nah.
But yeah, we're about to totally morph into off-season mode, and I think you guys know we're excited for it, and we know you are.
Yeah, make sure you guys are following along on Twitter at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks too. Also, subscribe to the Locked On Colts podcast on YouTube. We're nearing 2,000 subscribers. We'd like to get to that soon, so make sure you guys make that happen. And thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you guys tomorrow.